Nations Sustainability and Development Goals and how those relate to sustainable fashion as a framework. I think many of you would have viewed and seen the latest news, which is a little bit more Eurocentric, for the Fashion Pact, and they're using the science-based targets as their framework for the work that they're going to be doing. But today, we're going to cover policy that's more specific to Africa itself. So if I can introduce to you our panelists. We have JENNFER. So JENNFER RÖNNE. Please correct me. That's okay, I'm so sorry. Is the owner of Victoria Grace Fashion UK Limited, Victoria Grace Enterprise Ltd Nigeria, and Charis Majoris Limited. She is the creator of a fashion label, a strategist, business consultant, mentor, wife, and mother. I like that you've added them. Those are full-time roles. Too good. She has a degree in marketing and a master's in financial markets and derivatives. Her fashion career was with Condé Nast, Vogue, UK, Calvin Klein, merchandising as an independent fashion PR. Her financial career found her working also in the UK for the consultant KPMG, Lehman Brothers, and Morgan Stanley. She relocated to Nigeria, where she continued as a business strategist and consultant. She later became the Director General and Board Member of the Nigerian-German Business Association. Today, she is on several advisory boards and continues to work as an independent trade and business consultant. She's a member of the Institute of Directors. Her label, Victoria Grace Fashion, is a women's clothing label. It is an ethical and sustainable brand supporting persons and marginalised communities found along the value chain. And our next panelist, let's stay with the ladies. We have PUMELA. SALELA is a country head of the United Kingdom under brand South Africa, the custodian of the South Africa country brand. Her role is to market South Africa in the UK, attract foreign direct investment, FDI, into South Africa, mobilise global South Africans, GSA, abroad, and to manage the brand reputation of South Africa. Prior to serving in this role, PUMELA was the Chief Director of Economic Policy Development and Planning at the Department of Economic Development in South Africa. The Rockefeller Foundation acknowledged her contribution and innovation in formulating systems which address poverty by selecting SALELA to be one of the 18 global recipients of the Foundation's inaugural Global Fellowship on Social Innovation, and only South African to receive that honour. PUMELA has also worked as a consultant for the World Bank, based at the organization's headquarters in the United States, and the director, BPO, at the DTI South Africa. The director role was preceded by her position as Deputy Director for Investment Promotion at Trade and Investment South Africa. She has also been a lecturer in Strategic Brand Management at VEGA, V-E-G-A, the School of Branding. SALELA studied to complete her MBA with distinction in England through a Nelson Mandela Scholarship. PUMELA is the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Scholarship Alumni Association and a mentor to Greta Mackel Scholars. She is featured in the 2013 issue of the book South Africa's Most Inspirational Women. She is the 2018 recipient of the African Achiever Award. And last but not least, and you have to follow these astounding ladies. Albert Tucker is a social entrepreneur and consultant. He is an experienced director, coach, and mentor with international experience of governance and global project delivery. He is chairman of ETICO, an international ethical trading organization, director of Macola UK, and foundation chairman. He is board member of PMIA, Proudly Made in Africa, which promotes and markets goods including fashion goods manufactured in Africa. He is also an independent consultant experienced at facilitating and supporting enterprises globally and across cultures. He was pioneering CEO of the fair trade company, Twin Trading, and is a key figure in the fair trade community regeneration and sustainable development sectors, responsible for creating a range of social enterprises. A trusted advocate and enterprise developer for small-scale farmers in global trade and policy, He has a strong record in leading and building successful social enterprises, working to multiple bottom lines, e.g. Karma Cola, Cafe Direct, Divine Chocolate, and Twin Trading. He has an abiding interest in engaging communities and individuals to use enterprise, advocacy, and research as tools for self-determination and development. He has an MA in social policy and administration. So, with your background in trade and policy, would you be able to share with us, Albert, your thoughts on the recent African Continental Free Trade Agreement that has just been launched? Naturally, Nigeria has been the last to join. They have watched the space until the very last minute because it's been positive that they have. I think people don't realise, but this is obviously driven by the African Union, and it will create the largest trade bloc in the world. And it will actually facilitate Africa looking inwards towards solutions that tie the continent together. And what are your thoughts and your hopes?
Actually, I have to say, despite all the policy things, I'll have to edit that biography a bit. But despite all the policy things, I think for me, we need to think about policy as a tool for trade and generating wealth, income and development in the areas we're talking about, particularly when we talk about Africa. So let's think about policy that way, not as a dry stellar. Up until not so long ago, I mean, one of the organizations I don't mention there is AFO, the African Diaspora Organization, which I'm also part of, is one of the things I do work-wise and policy-wise, who we lobbied long and hard when we discovered that actually it was easier for most businesses in Africa to do business with the West than it was to do business with each other. And that held Africa back a lot. So we were very strong in doing advocacy and campaigning, particularly as part of the former Millennium Development Goals and SDGs, that the African governments really look hard at creating the possibility to trade between each other better. And I think that's one of the things, in whichever business we're doing, we've got to support and develop. Many business people don't think they're policy people, but the large corporates do. They influence governments and so on. So I think if you're working in Nigeria, it's important that the Nigerian government understands this. So for me, it's a very welcome thing, as is the idea of an African passport and being able to travel between countries more easily. Because I think that when we talk about fashion, I want to challenge the fashionistas here, and the real fashion people, because I don't count myself as one. I think it's Chimamanda Adichie who said, there's a danger of a single story, and Africa is always victim to that. I made the mistake of borrowing one of my father's country cloth tops a little while back, because I loved it and I was proud of it, and I decided to wear it to Sierra Leone. And when I got there, the elders in the village looked at me and said, who told you you have the right to wear that? You've never earned enough to be able to wear that. So we have that side of it, and then we have what I see designers here are doing and all of that. And we've got a whole range in between, which we need to market. The question for me is, how do we do it? And we get the policies made so that we could do it. When I started working in fair trade, there was not anywhere near the products. We were working with coffee and cocoa. By doing the work and the businesses we did, we worked out what the strategies and the policies would be to benefit the people we work with, and then to interest consumers. So I think the agreement is fantastic as a written document, and as an agreement. But I think we have to now market African markets and African businesses, African designers, African fashion, modern and ancient, to our own communities across Africa, so that we grow that market. Because once it becomes important, it's not just us who think what's in the West is great. When Africa does anything, the West grabs it and changes it. So how do we create that tipping point? It's the next move. So I think this is a great first step. It's only a small part of the story. I think the fashion industry currently, and the interest in African fashion, has a fantastic opportunity to take on the fashion. Forget Louis Vuitton. They came out of the period when French fashion was seen as it. How do we make African fashion it? So somebody will be saying, Victoria Grace, how can we get Victoria Grace to do more European style fashion or more traditional ancient African style fashion and make it as big as it's made other things? So I think we've got some journeys to go. But we are the policymakers. What do we know about the area? Where the areas I've worked in, you had a long catalogue of them there, have been products that are produced in Africa that nobody knew was produced by Africa. coffee, cocoa. Children didn't know cocoa came from Africa. They thought it came from Belgium and from places like that because it wasn't chocolate. So we made a big deal of making sure people know the provenance of things, know that it's quite expensive to produce and difficult to produce. And some people who are producing it can't afford to live producing something so good. Some of the most valuable commodities in the world. So the trade figures, I don't believe them. Africa is everywhere. But when it's not recognized, it's not valued even by us. And so it's not paid for. So I think there are three things. There's one is we build the African markets, not just have the policy, but we actually do really good trade between ourselves and promote it to our consumers on the continent. There's over 800 million or so in Nigeria alone, I think. But so we've got a large consumption market potential, which we should develop. Once we develop that, believe me, everybody else in the world will be interested, and we export to them because that's foreign exchange. And then we actually grow into the modern world. Our young people in the tech world are doing this. In fashion, our young people here are doing it, and I'd love to see the connection with the young people there, designers and manufacturers. So the supply chain is quite important. If we create a supply chain from Africa, I think what you were saying about, it's not about the product, it's about the artist. How do we give the artists the tools from Africa to work with? Whichever artists want to represent and acknowledge that. So I think the structure is fantastic, but we've got to exploit and use it. And I say that not cynically. Many countries in Africa have the best environmental policy in the world. The best green policies in the world. They're sitting on shelves, not being implemented. I'd love to see this properly implemented, and I think that's the next stage.
Indeed. And I think I mentioned it in my speech earlier, but we have the whole world circling around Africa and its resources and its talents at this given moment. I'm not sure how widely people read around policy, but there is a Russia-Africa conference that's happening, I think, this year. There's a UK and Africa conference coming up, and recently there was a Tokyo International Conference on African Development. So there's a lot of interest, but as mentioned in the keynote speech I did this morning, in whose interest will this be? Because we don't want it to be an exercise of investors coming in and an exercise of extraction. We want it actually to create prosperity for Africa itself. Jennifer, you have the label Victoria Grace and more. What are your thoughts and hopes around this particular policy?
Well, hello everybody. It was interesting when I thought I was going to come onto this panel, and I thought, okay, you are a small, medium-sized fashion brand. You're probably the same as everybody else on the other side of the table. We're all the same. What does trade policy mean to me as a fashion brand? You know, and making my clothes in Africa or not? And the only thing that struck me is that we are all here in a new age. This is the first time in history we are all going to witness a time when trade in Africa is going to start from a whole new sheet. And we're talking about policy. At the moment, government is still trying to lay out the policy for the Continental Free Trade Agreement. We are going to be reading it along as they lay it out, because it's just been signed. We're also sitting here as we know that Brexit is about to happen, right? And the UK is leaving the EU, and there are some trade policies that will have to change. We're going to have to find another way of trading as UK or, so how does that benefit a fashion designer? It doesn't matter how old you are or how long you've been in the business. All of us have to start today, and we have to actually, and we can get all the policies in place to get ourselves ready for the change. We are the first, we're the forerunners of the change in Africa. We are the Africa is now. We are sitting in this room. All of us who are interested in fashion, we are the ones that can make that difference. We can show that this agreement is not just in writing, by actually knowing what those policies are, how to export, how to import, how to trade in Africa, how to intertrade within Africa, how to deal with the issues with the customs, how to, the question about fabrics and how you mix the whole, all these are new questions that haven't been answered. And I think that that's why we're here to dialogue about that. So for Victoria Grace, it's great for me to actually learn and also be part of the dialogue. And I hope that we can probably, discuss how we're going to do that together.
And PUMELA, SALELA, as the country head of the United Kingdom and the brand South Africa, you must be addressing this at the top level.
I'm going to wear a pan-African hat because I'm very passionate about Africa as a whole. So, firstly, we know that there is strength in unity. The reality is that this Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to ensure that Africans are united and Africans speak with one voice. And that will give us our strength on the negotiation table. And it will also create a market of 1.2 billion people. And they say that the combined GDP of all these countries is more than 2.2 trillion US dollars. But I want to concur with my brother that there's an enabling environment that must be created for this Continental Free Trade Agreement to actually be effective. And I'll say it at 3 levels very quickly. 1 is market integration, 2 is industrialization, and 3 is the issue of infrastructure. This Continental Free Trade Agreement addresses the issue of market integration. It's opening the door for the integration of the market, or African regional, integration on a broader level. But that's just one aspect. What we need to consider is that, first of all, there has to be an enabling environment, and that enabling environment must be created through the infrastructure. And this infrastructure involves the sea, the land, the logistics, and ensuring that you were talking about trade and efficiencies, that there are efficiencies at the border level. If you've made clothing, it must be able to reach another country seamlessly without bottlenecks at the border gates. And then the third one that we also need to think about, so because we need to really be far ahead and ensure that each country takes a responsibility to make sure that the country is ready to capitalize on the gains of this Continental Free Trade Agreement. So what I mean by the industrialization of the continent is that there is an opportunity to create value chains, regional value chains, where each region will look at what its strengths are and look at collaborating to ensure that there is sense in collaboration, and that each region focuses on its strengths. There'll still be again that strength within the unity. So we need to start thinking, what is each region good at? We already have the AGOAs, the SADCs, the regional integration blocks within the continent. So it doesn't mean that we should just leave out all of them, but we need to come together and be ahead of our game to ensure that we are ready the minute that this Continental Free Trade Agreement is implemented, that we also have, as I said, the enabling environment to ensure that it comes to life.
Do you mind just touching on the nuances of why South Africa were also late to the table in terms of signing up to this agreement, if that's possible? Not too difficult.
You see, South Africa has got its own approach to regional integration, and South Africa also has its own partnerships that are already existing. And the country's approach to regional integration has been that, for example, South Africa has assisted other countries in terms of their own infrastructure development. So this came at a time when South Africa already had its own policies. For example, if you're looking at South Africa's National Development Plan, under Chapter 7, you will see that these are the plans that South Africa already had for the continent. So when this came, it was about finding, tying in the loose ends to say, how does it differ, or what are the synergies between what the country is already doing with what will be done on a bigger scale?
Can I just add on a couple of things you said there? I mean, if you listen to the discussion earlier, we had at least 2 very strong designers in this country saying they were sued by people who now are claiming to own something we think of as African. That's quite an important aspect of these agreements with countries, that we actually start looking seriously at intellectual property. In Africa, we haven't done so. So we are unable to protect anything that you know. So one of the things I'm looking for is that part of this agreement is about being able to both have policies around intellectual property, so that we start saying what is owned by Africa. So, you know, Italian leather is Ethiopian light, well, nobody knows that. And so we can start using these continental agreements to strengthen our intellectual property ownership is one thing. And ability to negotiate. So a few years ago when the G8 was in the UK, a very, very well-known influential Ugandan was talking to me about how pleased he was to see so many leading African business people and country ministers in the G8. But as it turned out, they were all going in, negotiating with the EU and the other countries individually. And one of the advisors who was talking to me was laughing. He was saying, well, none of them even knew what the other one negotiated, so we could tell them to negotiate less. So this, I hope, would be for anybody who's able to advise on any of the negotiators. And businesses can do this, as I said earlier. Please try and inform them so that the policies include things that actually enable our businesses to do better.
Yes, so I mean, we're talking about trade policy here, and so there are a lot of trade blocks. So if you make it close in the UK, or if you make it close in Africa, at some point, as a business, you're an exporter or an importer. That's what you will be. You have to, as a business, we can't help, you have to understand the import and export regulations, and we are obliged to comply with these regulations. So we have beautiful trade blocks like the AGOA, where Nigerians or Africans can export, sub-Saharan Africa can export to the United States of America, but you find that the numbers are very low. So we have existing agreements, and advanced countries like Mauritius and South Africa in this area. They also have very low export, not as high as you would have expected. And the reason is that the regulation and the policy for being able to qualify to get this tax-free incentive or duty-free incentive comes in the fact that maybe, for example, this fabric I'm just wearing now actually originally probably comes from China, or probably it has intellectual property laws that, you know, so I imported it from China, but made it in Nigeria, and then decided to export it under AGOA. And when it gets to the customs in America, they'll send it back or give me a very, very fat bill. Why? Because the fabric, the original source of your finished good does not have 100% of the country of origin where they signed the agreement with. This is going to happen with the continental free trade. As a business, we have, and that's what the lady before was talking about, we have to create the value chain in Africa. We have to make our own fabrics. We have to do our own intellectual property in Africa. We have to source our cotton within Africa. We have to find our zips and our buttons. That's also another thing that affects the import and export. We have to find that within Africa, work together, integration. And then when you export using these wonderful, wonderful, beautiful, you know, wonderful trade agreements that we are exposed to, and they are beautiful, but when you're ready to export, your goods can go through and you can benefit from these wonderful incentives. A lot of us don't get that benefit because we are not taking this into consideration. And fashion is a business, and we have to treat it as a business. And so one of the first things we have to do as people in fashion business, we have to attend conferences, seminars, sign up to export and trade boards, and get this information. And we have to know the policies, regulations that are part of our own industry. Otherwise, we pay a lot and we can't really move further. And I think that's my experience from my brand as Victoria Grace.
And beyond that, I think in the way that might also create a trust between Africans, because in speaking with Mariama Fashion Productions, who I represented earlier, Mariama mentioned on the telephone call yesterday that she was deeply saddened by the fact that the leading voice in textiles within Africa is a Chinese woman, and that's not necessarily an issue, but and the thing is not so much that fabric is what upset her, but it was more so that Africans themselves trusted this individual more than fellow Africans. So I think that shows a deeply ingrained issue, and perhaps perhaps this policy will promote a greater trust between Africans.
But on the opportunity side, though, on the opportunity side, no, but I speak as somebody who's part of a company who decided to take on one of the largest companies in the world. If you're going to do that, you better be darn good. Also, you better really benefit the people who you're working with and tell their story. This is not an African-owned company originally, but in wanting to source a tiny product that's quite significant and gave half of the name to this product, to the most famous version of this product, they don't use any kola nuts from Africa anymore. So we decided we were going to use natural kola nuts from Africa and tell everybody we're the only ones who do, and where it came from, and actually support the communities that supply it to us because it's only a small volume. And consumers have been very, very positive about that. Of course, we had to make it look very good and taste very good as well, and that's equally important, I think, to your point. So, having said all of that, I think that the opportunity is, these are all businesses that we have the opportunity to now create. The supply chain, as I mentioned earlier, as African businesses, let's not just see ourselves as the end developer. How do we collaborate to create supply chain that supplies all of these things? So forget the agreement with Britain and the EU. Let's compete with them. Let's produce this stuff to the quality that other people will buy it from us, and they will buy it from us in the future. And just on Brexit, I would also say, the other thing we need to be very, very careful of, a lot of the Brexiteers and advisors of Brexiteers who are saying that this is an opportunity for Britain to work with Africa. They're still thinking of Britain working with Africa in the same way it did when we were colonies of Europe. That has to not be the case. India knows this, and their ministers are beginning to talk about, well, if you want it, there are things we want to be able to do that trading. But we've got to get our supply chains, our infrastructures, all the things that you mentioned earlier, strong enough that we can compete. And I think that's the opportunity I see. Right across the supply chain, there are opportunities. It will take us time, but I think there are opportunities there for entrepreneurs, inside and outside the fashion industry, which we should exploit.
I think that carries us through nicely to the next question. With Brexit looming, many are concerned that this will cripple the UK-based businesses. What are your thoughts? And on that note, we've had within the UK announcement of a new Africa Investors Board and the Africa Investment Summit in the UK, which is happening in 2019, with the aim to make the UK one of the largest G7 investors into Africa. And I think in this instance, that's definitely for the benefit of the UK and the desperation as well. So what are your thoughts about Brexit?
Okay,
JENNFER.
well, I'm still on the same point as fashion, in the fashion business. When you're in the business fashion, then you have to think globally. You have to think that you are operating within the country that your business is, and you are thinking outwardly. So Britain is one area, Africa is one area, and the United States of America is one area. Russia is opening up, and a whole load of other relationships are going on. So as a business, we have to always be on all the countries. We can't just have the relationship with one country in the fashion business. It's just so as we watch Brexit unfold, we get ourselves ready and understand the policies, understand the regulations and the tariffs, try and find our way to getting, know what it is that our business needs to do. But in the meantime, carry on doing business within the country, with Africa, or with the countries that already have their trade agreements signed, the European, the EU agreements that are already there. Try and work with that whilst we are trying to find the right regulations for Brexit. So I can't really comment on what will happen, but we should get ready for whatever happens. And I think it'll be favourable for all businesses because we'll find our way through it.
And
I'll speak to specific opportunities that will arise for African countries post-Brexit that we can tap into. One is a UK-Southern African trade deal, which will be about economic partnership between countries within Southern Africa and the UK as soon as the UK leaves the EU. And this is a mutual agreement whereby the UK will bring some products into Africa and Africa will also bring some products into the UK. So for me, I'm speaking at the level where I'm saying, what are the opportunities? I'm sorry. what are the opportunities that are existing or that will exist, and how can we tap into that? The second one is the Prosperity Fund, where the UK is saying that it's willing to fund up to £8 million for the economic participation of both Africa and the UK. Finally, I know Jacqueline is looking at me like stop. Finally, the CDC is planning to invest £3.5 billion into Africa, and this is all about new investment opportunities between the two countries. You're not making it this easy for us.
Sorry, Jackie, as you're standing there, just so our role as people in the diaspora and consumers is also going to be quite important.
Thank you to all the panelists.